Hi, and welcome to the Revena Digital webinar, Customer First, From Contact to Sale, Bridging the Gap Between Marketing and Sales to Build Rich Experiences. I'm Liz Kligowski, Editor-in-Chief of Teletech's Customer Strategist Journal, and I'll be the host of today's event. Now before we begin, I want to point your attention to our hashtag, Customer First. Even though this is an on-demand webinar, we want to try to make it interactive. So you'll see the hashtag throughout the presentation on each slide. We'll be monitoring that hashtag on Twitter, so if you have any questions as you watch the presentation, please post it using the hashtag and we'll be sure to respond via Twitter or take the conversation offline. Our contact information will also be available at the end of the webinar as well. So let's meet today's guest. Today I'll be speaking with Susan McKenna, Vice President of Client Strategy for Revena Digital. Susan develops and oversees implementation of data-driven digital marketing programs for a number of clients. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
So today's webinar will focus on three important areas. The first is the evolution of the customer journey and what it means for sales and marketing. Next, we'll talk about the difficulties and opportunities surrounding how to bridge the gaps between sales and marketing. And finally, how data and technology can help your company excel in the middle of that sales and marketing funnel. So let's get started where every company should start, which is the customer journey. So Susan, what are you seeing in the marketplace? How has today's customer journey evolved and transitioned in this age of high customer expectations and new technology?
Sure, thanks Liz. Today's journey, I think everybody would agree, has become very fragmented. In fact, consumers are being exposed to, on average, over 5,000 ads per day, which kind of trickles down into how many ads do they actually see, absorb, are they aware of, and do they actually make an impression? And if you sort of whittle that down from 5,000, it takes a lot of different sources for consumers to make a decision. So last year, during the holiday season, Google reported that 12 sources on average is what people are using to make a purchase decision. That's everything from search to social to friends to looking at offline broadcast commercials, researching their brand or their products. And so the experts are suggesting that perhaps this year, in 2015, as mobile is exploding and social media continues to grow exponentially, as e-commerce endeavors continue to grow, that consumers will be exposed to, on average, 13 to 15 sources before they can make a purchase decision. What does that mean for us? Well, that means that in 2010, they were exposed to about 5, and that number has almost tripled in less than 5 years. So what that really means is that not only is it highly fragmented, but now the journey is becoming really complex. Yesterday, we had a very clear linear format from a marketing and sales standpoint. We generated awareness, the consumer went into a consideration phase, they made a purchase, we kept them loyal. Today, that funnel is very complex. It's an omni-channel funnel. It's a funnel that we have to have multiple touch points in order to help them through that 12-point consideration, awareness, and purchase phase. And so today, that funnel has become very complex. And so as marketers and as sales organizations, we have to find ways that we can communicate in a meaningful, cohesive manner with consumers from point A to point Z, from the point of contact during the marketing process or during the brand exposure process, all the way through to the end of the sale. And that's incredibly important, not just as marketers, but if we're putting our customers first, then we have to figure out ways that we can have meaningful, rich, engaging conversations with them.
So even now, it seems that sales and marketing are having trouble working together, and as this funnel gets more and more complex, that's only going to get more difficult. So what would you say are some recommendations of how sales and marketing can bridge those gaps and create a more seamless journey so that the customer experience is even that much better?
Yeah, great question. The reality is that we talk a lot about one element really changing and transforming business. Digital is seeing the frontier of this, and that's data. The problem is right now is that data is the key to a rich customer journey, but it's really siloed. And so I'll go into some detail maybe a little bit later talking about why that's happening and how we can solve that problem. But The reality is that data is very siloed from marketing to sales to customer service, and so it's very difficult to access that information. It's very difficult to create actionable insights from that information. And so if we are able to access it and we are able to transfer it to the people who need it when they need it, we have a very difficult time organizationally of creating actionable insights. Everyone is talking about big data. A lot of marketers are now talking about microdata and how do we leverage that information to generate qualified, cost-effective leads, or to generate qualified and qualified customers for e-commerce businesses. But the reality is that we have a very difficult time making that data centralized and figuring out ways that we can access it, transfer it, and create what I call actionable insights. And that's going to be increasingly important for organizations to figure out how they can decentralize their data and figure out how to leverage this very important element of creating rich user experiences.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, companies in all industries are constantly worrying about how to integrate those silos and get that data to be centralized. So getting back to the sales and marketing piece with that, there's always seems to be an area in the middle of the funnel that can be a challenge for a lot of companies. So what would you recommend, or what are some areas that you can point to that would help companies manage that middle area of that very, very complicated funnel these days?
Absolutely, and this is probably the most difficult piece, and I'll spend a fair amount of time talking about it because I think this is a code that we haven't yet cracked. We are working at nipping away at it, but I want to address some of the issues as to why it's so complicated to get into the coveted middle of that funnel to really create those experiences. I talked about this earlier, but the key really is that data is decentralized, and it's unactionable as a result. There's just too many technologies. You've got CRMs, you've got programmatic display vendors, you've got Google, you've got your data repositories, you've got your marketing tech platforms, you've got your advertising tech platforms, you've got your customer relationship platforms, you've got your ERP platforms, and so the technology is everywhere. It's surrounding us. So all of these data repositories are all in separate buckets. And even if we're able to extract the data into our loving Excel spreadsheet, the reality is that it's not easily accessible. We can't transfer it between organizations, marketing to sales to customer service, or marketing to customer service to sales back to marketing. It's not transferable, and most importantly, it's not in real time. And what does that translate into? That translates into the inability to create what I call actionable insights. Actionable insights are the ability to look at this data that marketing collects or that sales collects and translate it for the other organization, because we're not transferring that data, we're not able to create those insights, and we're not able to optimize our campaigns on the front end or optimize our sales efforts on the back end or continue keeping our customers retained in the middle of it. So in order for us to create those rich user experiences and engagements, we have to we have to centralize the data, and that's incredibly important. Here's some examples of data that each organization needs, and I only talked about marketing and sales here because I think this is where it begins, and if we can figure out a way to centralize our data and we can figure out a way to communicate, we can actually create an environment where we're talking to the user in a very meaningful manner. So let's look at the right side of this slide first. Marketing data and insight that sales needs is very important because when sales people are on the phone talking to potential customers, for example, during the time of day, knowing when that lead converted. Did it convert in the morning? Did it convert in the afternoon? Was it Mountain Time or Pacific Time, for example? We know some of that information based on geography. For example, if it's a B2B company, we might know that they're probably not in the office at 8 o'clock at night, but the question is, at what time can I reach them and get them on the phone? Some of that data that's collected during the marketing acquisition phase can be incredibly important for sales to actually convert that lead. Likewise, sales data that is collected on the sales side is very meaningful for marketing. Sales data like order value, lifetime value, contract term, all of that information we're constantly looking at from an optimization perspective. But do we know why they don't convert from a sales perspective? Do we know what objections our Salesforce or our call center encountered during that sales process? Because if we did, as marketers, we know that we can now optimize our cost per lead or our cost per sale campaigns to be more effective. Data is the key to unlocking how that user progresses through the journey. And if I'm able to transfer the data in real time to my Salesforce when they're on the phone or before they pick up the phone, that information that I've gathered during marketing, like what segments did we target and what were the behaviors associated with those segments to get them to convert at 2:30 in the afternoon? How is that content consumed? Are they interested in information or are they interested in talking to a salesperson, which tells us where they are in their awareness, consideration, or discovery. So this data that marketing needs, that sales is collecting, or that sales needs that marketing is collecting is incredibly important. And these are some examples of that data that we're just not doing a very good job of transferring, making accessible in real time so that we can be actionable from those insights we glean. Let me give you some examples on the marketing side. So during digital advertising campaigns, if we are able to leverage data, we can provide those insights from the point of first contact. And here's some good nuggets to consider. 75% of consumers said that they're frustrated when the content on a website doesn't align with their interests. If I'm searching for red shoes and I'm landing on a page that's selling me brown boots, I'm not interested any longer because it's not contextual to what I've just searched on. And the advertiser is not listening to what I am looking for, and it's not creating a user experience that's very engaging to me. If I use predictive analytics from a marketing standpoint, then I'm able to lift my engagement. Other stats here that can kind of show you how marketing insights and data can really lift your ad campaigns. Consumers want content in a way that's personalized to them. They want contact at the right time, in the right place, with the right message. And the marketing analytics that we collect from the point of contact, whether it be a served banner ad or a query from a search engine, or whether that be a channel, an omni-channel optimization methodology, consumers more and more want that personalized journey, and we talk about it a lot on marketing. The question is, do we transfer that information into sales, which I'll talk about in a minute. But some examples of our digital marketing ROI. How do we get to that very complex equation of variables? We all talk about journey mapping. It's a very big buzzword in the community now in marketing, in addition to leveraging our macro data, our big data. And so we create user personas and we look at how did they come to us? What was the source? What was the dimension of that source? How have they leveraged that source in the past? How many times have they, for example, seen banner ads being served up to them, and how did they engage with our brand? What type of activity did they take? Did they respond to some kind of ad or some kind of content that we've served up to them? Do we know what kind of history they have with our company? Are we leveraging our big data, like our first-party databases, our prospect databases, our customer databases, our no longer our terminated customer databases? Are we leveraging that information to identify information about these people to create a persona? And when we take that information and then share it with sales or customer service, now we really are creating incremental revenue for our organization, which again I'll get to in a minute. But the question is, for digital advertising, how do we take that information and then optimize our campaigns accordingly? We are talking about creating the right message at the right time for the right value. And that's really what journey mapping is doing. We all know it on the marketing side, and the question and the challenge that I pose to all of you listening is, are we doing that well from marketing to customer service to sales to create a really fluid, cohesive, rich experience for our customers so that we can retain them longer, we can create larger average order values, so that we can create larger and more expansive conversion rates that ultimately affect our bottom line. This is about creating incremental revenue, and there are really only two ways. You either sell more or you sell it at a lower pace, and that's how you create more profitability for your organization. So this whole idea of personalizing the message in the right place and at the right time creates a certain type of value for the customer, and that's That's really important because on the marketing side of things, we're gleaning so much information. I call it creepy cool because we have all this technology at our fingertips to tell me where you are locating your information, from what kind of device, at what time of day. Are you close to a retail outlet, for example? But I'm not taking that information and I'm not really transferring over to sales.
Yeah, that's some great information. And like you said, some of the themes that I've heard so far have been the idea of integrating a lot of that data, knocking down those silos, and becoming more of a cohesive organization across the sales, marketing, and even service areas. So do you have any examples of companies that have done this, and just to share a little bit more context to how you can put these into practice?
Absolutely. Let me give you a few examples on the data-driven digital marketing side of the universe, and maybe later on we can get into sales because that's obviously the end game here for everyone. On the digital marketing side, let me give you 3 examples across different types of industries, whether it's B2C or B2B. The fundamental idea does not change. Let's take, for example, a media supply company. Their challenge was that they could not get decent conversion rates on their website. So we took a look at things, we analyzed the data, we started creating segments, we started creating some profiles and personas for their traffic. And what we found is that by splitting their traffic based on gender, they were able to increase their website conversion and engagement by 38%. I mean, that's a huge increase in conversion to generate leads for a media-driven company, a publishing company. Secondly, a services-based company, a national wedding services that provides services for people that are being married. Their challenge was that they needed to expand their brand and their digital footprint. The question was, how do they do that without spending a bankroll on direct mail or offline broadcast techniques that they didn't have the budget to do? So what we did is we connected their offline touch points, their direct mail campaigns, with social. And what we saw was a 40% lift in how people were engaging with that brand. We saw additional lifts in how that brand was able to expand their digital footprint over social media because we looked at all of the segments and we were able to target behaviorally using social media, which is incredibly important. And we took their first-party data, their customer list, their prospect list from their direct mail campaigns, and we imported into our social media to create lookalike audiences. So now we had personas that were developed specifically for this client, personas of people that we knew were going to convert, and all of a sudden they began to generate even more leads using social media. And then lastly, my favorite, which is a B2B example, where the challenge here was how do we increase their sales? And I think B2B marketers in particular were all kind of struggling with digital. We know it's important. We're reallocating budgets for B2B, but the reality is that we're still searching for that ROI sweet spot because we're not really sure how to reach business people using digital technology. We know it works for consumers. We know it works well for retail, but we're still sort of searching. If we're selling electronic components, how are we reaching that marketplace? And so this example is a B2B marketplace company that was able to increase their search sales by 127%. And how do we do that? By creating buyer personas. And again, it was very similar to the media company, but it was slightly different because what we did is adjusted our media buying strategy based on those personas because we figured out where they were located, what devices they were accessing their website from, at what time of day, at what location, and we were able to customize messages and the strategy for buying media specific to that persona, and we saw a very big increase in sales from just search engine marketing, 127% increase overall, which was phenomenal for this client. So just some examples of how the digital advertising, digital marketing data can really change the landscape in terms of creating incremental revenue for companies. So the question is, how do we get from marketing to sales? And what I would challenge everyone on this call is to not stop with marketing, but to transfer that information and all of those customer insights into your sales organization. That's incredibly important because if we are able to, on the B2B side of things, increase sales just from an e-commerce perspective, imagine what we can do with our direct sales force. So that sort of ties it back into sales.
That's great, and some really great examples, and especially connecting then those dots in the middle of the funnel. So for people listening today, how can they apply some of these concepts to their own business, and what sort of advice do you have for companies that are grappling with this issue?
Sure. So let's start with best practices. And this is an example of what we used to do yesterday. We were looking for phone calls. So we use data sources to prioritize and manage our incoming leads. We would recognize the phone number. We would do a match back for the existing customer number. We would figure out what type of request they're asking for. Is it new? Is it upsell? Is it old? Are they canceling? We would look at campaign source codes, and we would figure out how to route and prioritize those calls and those leads based on what little information we could glean. We might even tap into our customer relationship management database to actually see what kind of data we had on them, if we had touch points, for example. But the data that was available to us was very limited, and the way we were routing calls to the person was different. The agent was skilled and understood a little bit about the needs of that customer, but that's because we just didn't have a lot of information on that person. But today, that optimization is changing. And if you look back at some of the examples I gave in terms of the marketing data we're collecting in terms of engagement and personalization and creating personas to create a buyer strategy that's mapped to your needs, now we're able to take that first-party data, your customer databases, your prospect databases, your canceled customer databases, and we're able to create personas. We're able to take third-party databases like your direct mail campaigns, and we're able to look at that information and create personas. What does that allow us to do? The difference is we're still prioritizing calls, and we're still creating lead prioritization, and we're still routing them, but we're doing them differently. Now we're able to match an expert agent with your specific need. So instead of just a skilled person that kind of understands retail or kind of understands electronic components or maybe understands printing, industry as a whole, now we're able to match a very well-trained subject matter expert with that particular persona of person. We're able to collect behavioral attributes rather than just in the old school world where we had kind of what do you need, when do you need it, how much do you want to spend. Now we're able to understand exactly what led them to make a request, to fill out a lead form, to contact us, to actually reach out and say, hey, I need help with a problem. We understand their behaviors, so now we're able to match them and prioritize and be much smarter in the lead prioritization process. And what this ends up creating, and I talked about this in marketing in terms of predicting and creating forecasting, is that we're able to do predictive modeling because now we can understand all this important information about how somebody converts into a lead that we can leverage that for our sales process, whether that be sales at the point of contact on your website like an e-commerce business, or whether that be sales from a longer sales cycle, a more complex B2B type of business type of sale.
And that's some really important and valuable information in the sales environment. So do you have any examples of this sort of thing in the sales world?
Why, I just might, Liz. Absolutely. So let me give you three different examples again. These are, I guess you could consider a law firm a little bit of B2C because all the consumers are buying the legal services, but it's a great case study in terms of how the marketing data helped us create actionable sales for clients, and I think it's really interesting. I mean, obviously you can see the numbers. We were able to really drive conversions and build their business on the mobile perspective. This was a national firm providing legal services to consumers. It was an advocacy company. So they were looking at ways to expand their brand and expand their profit share in the market. And the question was, how can they do that using search, and what is mobile doing to help their search campaigns. And what we found is when we started segmenting the market, when we started actually looking at the tactics in terms of media buying and search queries and things of that nature, we learned that mobile was a huge part of their acquisition campaigns, but that their website was not as optimized as it needed to be to convert people from the mobile queries. So we worked with them to develop landing pages that were mobile optimized, and we were able to drive mobile conversions and increase their mobile conversions over 1,000%. And those insights that we were able to glean from the marketing acquisition standpoint were so valuable in order to move the needle on those conversions. Second example is a telecommunications, a cable company that was looking for ways to really create those user personas I was talking about earlier in order to drive engagement and in order to improve their conversion rate. The numbers, again, speak for themselves. What do we do here? Here, we leverage that third-party data that I was talking about from the sales optimization process changes and how that is really affecting our ability to create actionable insights. So here, we took third-party data, we created user personas, we isolated 4 that were the 4 unique types of personas that were really driving all of the engagement, and we saw a 20% lift in conversion rate. And that's a great example of how we're taking our marketing data, giving it to sales, and we're creating an actionable insight that allows sales to create incremental revenue for the company. And then the last one of my favorites, is a very, very large telecommunication company down in Mexico. They were looking to increase their digital footprint and do quite a bit of different activities online. But obviously the end game for them is always sales. And so what we were able to do is link their online digital marketing campaigns with their offline. And what they saw was a 30% increase in their conversion ratio. This is a great example of an omni-channel approach that is really working for a company that was searching for ways to leverage digital to really expand their brand and to expand their company. And for this company, it really worked. You saw a 30% increase in their conversion. So just little nuggets, little examples of how centralizing that data, allowing it to be transferable, allowing it to be accessible to create these insights that we can make actions out of, just some little examples of how we were able to do that for some of our clients. So let me just do a quick next steps for everyone listening, because I've given you a lot of information and a lot of examples on the marketing and the sales side and all the different silos and the challenges that we're facing. And I want to leave you with a few ideas of how you can start to create solutions in your company, whether it's a mid-sized company with 500 employees and 100 million in sales, or whether you're in a very large Fortune 100 company. Even a startup, small businesses suffer from this silo challenge that we all have. So here are some things that you can take with you, you can get started on, and hopefully you can start making progress in terms of breaking down those silos. First, set your goal by looking at ways that you can optimize your performance at every step through the process. So if you are able to create seamless data that's actionable and continuously analyzed in real time, you're going to be able to leverage that data, create a central repository for that data, and you're going to be able to make a huge impact on incremental revenue. You're going to find where those fissures are, and you're going to be able to optimize it, whether it's a better cost per lead, or it's a better cost per sale, or it's a better retention, or it's a better lifetime value for your customers. You'll be able to see that data, and you'll be able to figure out where you can create incremental data, incremental revenue and profitability for your organization. Secondly, close the loop between sales and marketing. That's the first step. Don't worry about customer service initially. That will come over time, but close the loop between sales and marketing. If you do nothing else, try to figure out ways that you can get that data to be accessible in real time and transferable in real time. There are ways to do that, and that's the third bullet point, which is to create an integrated platform. There are some platforms, MarTech, advertising tech, that are looking to do that. I'm not sure that anybody has really figured out the exact technique for that, but there are solutions out there. Obviously, Revena Digital does look at solutions for a 360-degree type of platform that will help you from marketing to sales. That's what that visual is on the right side of the slide. But there are steps that you can take on your own with or without us, that will get you started in the right direction, because it's a big organizational shift to break down those silos. It's a huge organizational shift.
Yeah, those are some great recommendations and next steps. So we've gone through a lot of great information today, Susan. If you could, what are some key takeaways that you want to make sure that our audience definitely walks away with and can really start moving to get this concept going within their organization?
Last slide is your 3 key takeaways. First of all, bridge the gaps between marketing and sales. Do it in any way that you can possibly imagine it, but you have got to break down those silos, and you've got to create ways that you can keep the communication and the conversation rolling between your marketing and sales department. Many times your sales department won't even be located in the same part of the building or in the same state as your marketing department. So it's incredibly important to figure out ways that you can bridge those gaps between your marketing and sales organization. Data is the key to unlocking the insights needed for a smooth experience through the funnel. And my note to everyone is add actionability. You have to figure out ways that data is going to unlock those insights for you. And if you are not able to bridge the gaps between marketing and sales, use data as that bridge. Make data become that bridge so that all of your data is creating actionable insights. Actionable insights is the key to using data properly and breaking down those silos. Lastly, you've got to take the data and harness it. You've got to share it. You've got to make it accessible in real time. Once you're able to do that, that actionability component actually comes to life. So you'll create an environment that builds more deals, creates incremental revenue, and you'll have a lot more loyal customers and prospects. And those are the really 3 key takeaways. Bridge the gaps between marketing and sales. Figure out ways to unlock the insights to your data, and share that data and make it accessible in real time across your organization. If you can do those 3 things, then you can find ways to create incremental revenue, build profitability, and build a really strong base of loyal customers and prospects.
That's some really wonderful insight, Susan, and thank you so much for sharing your insight, your expertise, your experience today. Thank you all for joining us today on this webinar. Now, we've definitely just scratched the surface of this critical topic. So for anyone interested in learning more, this slide contains our Twitter handles as well as Susan's email. If you have some questions, we can definitely answer those via Twitter. And again, feel free to use the customer first hashtag as well. And we hope to engage each of you in some conversations about how to really take your sales and marketing to that next level. So this concludes the webinar, Customer First from Contact to Sale. I'm Liz Glogowski, and thank you everyone for attending, and have a wonderful day.